Hello, everybody. Welcome to 10 Tips for Implementing Data 360 Successfully. I'm Melissa Shepard. I'm the CTO and Managing Architect at a Salesforce partner called Maple Digital. I'm also a Salesforce CTA, an MVP, a MuleSoft ambassador, a community group leader, a conference organizer, and I've been in the ecosystem for about 20 years. If you would like to scan this QR code, you can give feedback after the session. So they were giving away gift cards. Those are probably gone by now, but you can still give your feedback. Also, session summaries will be available. So look for those. Those will be recaps, and you'll find them in the Salesforce Events mobile app or online on the session event page. Also, got to go over the forward-looking statement. Just make sure you're making your purchasing decisions on what is available today, on not anything you see in this session. All right, so first, we're going to go over what Data 360 is. This is a quick overview for anyone that's not too familiar yet. So Data 360 is a unified data management platform. So it helps you centralize data from multiple data sources to create a single source of truth and allows you to create unified profiles. It also helps provide data for real-time analytics, so it can drive better decision making. It provides a scalable platform for larger amounts of data. So instead of bringing all that data right onto the Salesforce platform, you still are able to use that data without fully bringing it onto the platform in a more scalable way. So as your data increases over time and your volumes grow, Data Cloud helps you scale better. It also helps you easily connect to all your different source systems with both structured and unstructured data. So the unstructured data is things like maybe PDFs or chat transcripts, stuff like that that's not in a normalized database. And it helps you get that data into a normalized form where you can actually use it. Also, it provides a bit of governance, so it helps you govern your data and your metadata at scale across the different apps and agents. And then it helps you create more seamless integrations, so you can connect with Salesforce applications, other third-party tools, you can connect Salesforce orgs. So there's a lot of different use cases for it. So how it works. So first, you're going to connect to your different data sources, and you're going to create data streams. Then you're going to bring that data into Data Cloud, Data 360, and harmonize and unify that data. Then you're going to govern it. Then you might want to do things like segment it and then use it for predictions. And then you're going to activate it to your different targets. So things like Agentforce or Tableau or other Salesforce apps or other third-party apps. So when to use it versus when not to use it. So you're going to want to use it when you want to harmonize disparate data to create a single view of a customer. So it's going to also unify those profiles with related data from multiple systems. It allows you to build insights on these unified profiles. Also allows you to segment on this harmonized data. And then it allows you to activate that data to drive relevant experiences across your apps and agents. So you can think about this as being a foundation for Agentforce if you want to start going in that direction. But I'll go over what it's not meant to be. It's not meant to be a full ETL or middleware tool. Can be sort of used like that, but that's not the intended use. It's also not a full data cleansing platform. It's not a full MDM platform. If you want that, go look at Informatica. It's not a golden record. It's not data governance. It's not backup and disaster recovery, and it's also not a full business intelligence platform. But it's a great tool to use with all these different types of systems and tools. It's a great foundation for everything that you have in the enterprise. All right, tip number 1. This is important. You really need to just understand the platform because it's different than just Salesforce CRM. So you've got a whole different standard data model. You've got data categories. You've got all different connectors that you can use for different systems. You've got identity resolution rules. So understanding that and the order of execution to even be able to run identity resolution, that's very important. Also, you want to understand the data source object versus the data lake object versus the data model object and the order that you bring the data in and how to map it. Understand the things like calculated and streaming insights, activation targets, data actions, and then also the different kinds of automations that you can use, like data cloud triggered flows or using Apex to query data cloud data. And then understanding sandbox environments and how you move your data cloud implementation from sandbox to production. So there's a lot here, a lot to dig into. There's a lot of resources out there, but really just understand all these different aspects of the platform. Tip number 2, not a technological one, but this is more about the business. You want to involve your stakeholders early. This is important because you want to get your cross-functional buy-in from all the different IT and business units that are going to be involved in your implementation. Very important, because a lot of times when you're working with Data Cloud, you're working with things like marketing, IT, sales, support, etc. So get them involved from the start, because you really need their input to make sure your implementation is successful. They're going to give you key insights into how the data is going to be used, what the source data is like. They're going to help you understand it better, and early buy-in will promote smoother adoption. An example is I had to do an implementation with Google BigQuery. I did not understand that source data. I really had to work with the stakeholders to understand what that data was and how I was going to get it into Data Cloud so that it would be usable. Tip number 3, so you always want to make sure you're defining clear business objectives. You want to make sure you're aligning the implementation with business goals. You might want to identify your key use cases, so maybe only focus on a couple at first, and then the desired outcomes for those use cases. And then this one's really a good one, KPIs. So I like to speak a lot about KPIs and ROI, and those are the things that business users like to hear. That's the language that you're going to speak when talking to executives. If you can start to identify KPIs to measure success, it's going to make your job a lot easier. And then have a clear strategy. So make sure you understand the process and the steps you're going to go through to get the source data into Data Cloud and then make it actionable. So you might want to pick some use cases such as improving your customer segmentation or increasing email personalization, boosting cross-channel marketing, or you might want to make data easily accessible for your service reps to make their jobs easier, or even just try to increase sales revenue. There's a lot of different use cases across a business that you can use Data Cloud, Data 360 for. That name change is tripping me up. Tip number 4, assess your data readiness. So this is also critical. You really need to do a data audit of your source data. Like I said, sometimes you might not really understand that data, so to understand how to get it into the right places in Data Cloud and into the right objects and perform the right mappings, you've got to do that data audit. You also have to look at the source data types versus the data types of the fields that you're going to, and attributes that you're going to be moving the data into within Data 360. So then you're going to also want to determine the proper data model. So what does that look like? What are the objects you're going to use? How are they related to each other? Do you need to create custom relationships? Do you need to create custom attributes on the objects? Do you need to create custom objects? A lot of different aspects to even just the data modeling alone that you really should understand. So then you're going to decide where that data will be mapped. So for instance, when I was working with that Google BigQuery data, it wasn't clear to me exactly where that data had to go in Data 360, so I had to do a lot of investigation into that data model and look at the schemas, look at the objects, look at the attributes, and say, okay, this makes sense. This is where this data should go, and that's how I figured out where to map it to. Then you're probably going to want to perform data transformations on that data. So as you're bringing it in, you might need to convert something to another format or another data type to get it to match. So those are important. But also understanding the different types of connectors, because some, like the zero copy, there's only, like, you can't create formula fields on those, but you can run data transformations, then understanding how data transformations will affect your implementation. So really understand all the data and how you're going to get it into your normalized form into your data model in Data 360. So remember, garbage in, garbage out. And I would say this is important as well, and this is what I always do with my implementations. Start small and scale. Do not try to do everything at once. Don't try to boil the ocean, because that's just going to make it a lot more difficult. Prioritize your MVP. That's your minimum viable product. What will bring the most value to the business? What would be the highest priority? Where can you get the most ROI or the most value? So focus on that single use case first and start there. Once you succeed there, you can gradually scale and expand to other use cases within the business. So really just focus on that one high-impact use case that you really think is going to make a big difference. Number 6 is you really want to try to leverage the native out-of-the-box integrations and connectors as much as possible. So there's a lot of different connectors out there. They're always adding more. They're always updating Data 360. I think it's every week. So you want to think about what you want to connect to. Go look to see if there's a connector. And then if not, there's other ways you can get around that. So there's the MuleSoft connector, which if you have MuleSoft in your environment, you can really kind of connect to anything with that and bring the data in through that. You can also push data to things like AWS or Snowflake or Databricks and then bring the data in that way. That would be more the zero copy because it's a data lake. So there's a lot of different ways you can get your data into Data 360. So you really want to think about that first before you start connecting and bringing things in, because you might have to go back and revise. Also, think about structured and unstructured data. Do you have, where is all that going to come from and how are you going to get it in? And then understanding the difference between the batch, the streaming, the real-time versus near real-time versus zero copy. There's a lot of different ways you can bring in data, and all of them have a big impact on the credit usage of your the data that you're bringing in, which we'll go over later. And then when you're accessing data in your data lakes, things like Snowflake or Databricks, you're gonna be using zero copy. That's just the way those connectors work. And there's some limitations there, so you want to understand that. I mentioned you can't use formulas on those. Next, you want to really define clear data governance policies. So within your organization, you want to define roles and responsibilities for data management. I don't know if you've ever been on an MDM type project, but usually have someone like a data steward, an admin of that system, just that's specifically for working with the data. Well, you can have a Data 360 admin. So you might have someone that has that specific role. You also want to think about implementing rules for data quality within your source systems to make sure you're always bringing in good data. And then also think about things like privacy and compliance, regulations like GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA. Always think about security as well, because when you start bringing in data from different source systems into one centralized place, security becomes even more important. Also, have a plan for when issues arise and be able to have a way to identify those issues before they become big problems. So you want to make sure you have some sort of contingency plan for data issues. And then also you want to think about using your sandboxes for development and testing and going through the normal promotion from sandbox to production. Number 8, credit usage. This is always a fun one. So gets a little complex here. So really understand and know the consumption types and what each one uses, because that's going to drive some of your decision making. So that calculation is based on number of rows processed. So there's a whole bunch of different things and categories that use certain types of processes that take different consumption rates. There's a complex calculation that goes into that. So you can actually use the Data 360 sizing calculator that will help you kind of estimate what your credit usage is going to look like. And then you're going to want to track your credit. So once you actually implement, keep tracking that over time, because that could change. It might not be a linear growth, but it could be an exponential growth, and that's going to get you in trouble. And that you would use the digital wallet, which I'll show you. Here's a table that shows some example usage types. So you get your connecting and harmonizing and unifying. And the one thing that should stand out here is the profile unification. That is your identity resolution. That's going to take the most credits. So it's lower within a sandbox, but sandboxes do still use credits. And this is the digital wallet. This is what you'll use to track your usage over time and make sure that things are not going out of control and it's staying within your expected range. And if you do see any issues arising where the credit usage is going up, that's going to help you identify the areas where you need to optimize. Number 9, so you're not just going to throw this into production and be like, all right, great, we're done here. You always want to monitor your data quality continuously. So that's making sure the data is coming in, it looks right, it's getting matched properly. And there are tools that you can use to help you do that. So there's App Exchange apps out there being built for Data 360. You can look into some of those. So make sure you're on top of that data quality. And if you start to see issues, try to fix those problems at the source. That's going to be the easiest way to do it. When I was dealing with some of that crazy data that I didn't really fully understand, I had to go back to some of the people that were in charge of those systems and say, hey, can you change these field types or do some transformations at the source? It's going to make it a lot easier for me when I'm mapping the data in Data 360. Number 10, measure and optimize. So you're always going to want to be thinking about, is this successful? Track your KPIs and tie those to the business objectives. You want to continuously optimize the platform based on these results. Regularly measure against desired outcomes. So you probably want to be having discussions with the business, going over these KPIs, seeing if they meet their expectations. If not, you know where to go back and start changing things and making adjustments. So you always want to be on top of the measurement of success. So in conclusion, a successful Data 360 implementation involves some key things. Careful upfront planning and defining business objectives and working with the key stakeholders, understanding platform capabilities and your credit usage, having a clear plan on how to get started, focusing on the data quality and the types of automation you might want to use, and then your continuous monitoring and optimization. If you want to learn more, there's lots of resources out there on Trailhead. So there's a whole trail mix for Data 360. If you don't have the certification yet, highly suggest going to get that. That trail mix will also help you with the certification exam. You can get a 5-day trial org and start playing around and start to get familiar with all of the different tools and functionalities within Data 360. But I will say one of the most important things is really start to understand that order of execution and what steps you have to take first before you can do other things like mapping, like what you have to do before you can even map data, what you have to do before you can run identity resolution rules. Those are some of the biggest mistakes I see people make when first working with Data 360 is not understanding the order of the steps you've got to take. And here's a resource guide I put together, a little bit about data modeling, planning your data strategy, the data modeling concepts, and then just an overview in the data model. So you can easily find those when scanning this QR code. And that's it. Thank you for coming, and thank you for coming to TDX, and I hope you had a great time and learned something from this session.